I decided to try and beat Team Sonic Story in Sonic Heroes without picking up a single ring. I had a look on YouTube to see if this had been done before, and it had been deemed impossible by 2 people. Go and check their videos out if you haven't already, because let me tell you, some of the results in this video do differ from theirs. And that includes the first ever casino park run with 0 rings collected. So stay tuned for that. Alrighty then, ladies and gentlefolk. I'm deciding to move away from babies games and we're going back to some form of children's games. Today we're playing Sonic Heroes, and I was going to play Shadow Reloaded because it's been on like my backlog for a long time now. But I thought of something last night which I don't know if anyone's already done on YouTube. They probably have, but I've not personally seen a video about it. Can we beat Sonic Heroes without collecting a ring? Now, obviously I watch these challenges all the time and I think to myself, Jesus Christ, that requires a lot of blood, sweat and tears, you know, I wouldn't be able to do that. But here we are, because, you know, I'm just a sucker for torture, as we've discovered over these past couple of weeks. But I'm excited to try it. Well, you know, all can be done. Also, if you haven't noticed, I'm down here now, because if I was up there, you wouldn't be able to see my ring count. Now then, let's go. Of course, we are playing this with emulation, as always. It's just easier for everybody. Right, Vamonos, challenge mode. We are going to be doing Team Sonic for this challenge. If I feel brave enough, then I will go and do the other teams. But for the time being, we're going to stick with the base game, and we'll see how far we can get with that. First up is Seaside Hill, and it didn't take me long to realise that there's going to be a small complication in terms of manoeuvring with this challenge. Okay. Oh, who's just picked a ring up? Okay, so we do have teammates in this game. Shit. I didn't account for that these guys are going to be able to pick rings up. Oh wait. Yeah, let's just be Tails, because they're in the totem pole. Yes, I have solved the equation. We have to play the whole game as Tails. I didn't figure out that rainbow rings counted toward the ring count until a little bit later, so expect there to be a few of those errors. While we run through this then, look, a little bit of context I suppose. Sonic Heroes is my favourite Sonic game of all time. Hands down. And it was also the first video... Oh god. Yes, don't go through there, I know there's rings in there. It was also my first ever video game, so there is a lot of bias in that statement, but I don't care. I think Sonic Heroes always gets a lot of unnecessary shit from a lot of people. Oh wait, I have a ring in my bank. When the hell did that happen? When did that happen? When did we get a ring? I think it's when we switched to Knuckles. Someone might have ran off to the side and picked that ring up behind us. So we genuinely just need to stick with Tails. Shit. Something I should clarify quickly before we move any further is that I utilise save states during this playthrough, just to avoid doing complete restarts whenever I touch the ring, because a lot of these stages do require RNG to essentially get past without touching a ring, and that is mainly the casino stages. So if you consider that cheating, then boohoo, I had a bit more fun when doing it this way, because I didn't have to load infinite lives or anything stupid like that, because I probably would never have beat this challenge. Load a save state. So evidently there are rings on the 2 red paths, but it doesn't look like there are any on the middle path. Oh, would you look at that. Let go of the thumbstick and the game does the exploit for you. Oh, bobsleigh. Shit. Right, now this is what concerns me, this part, because there's a hell of a lot of rings. This game practically gives rings out. Nice. Oh, that was close. Yes. When did I pick 2 rings up? What the hell happened? Do you get... Oh shit. Do you get rings when you go through rainbow rings? We're about to test this theory. You do. Oh my, I never knew that. I've been playing this game for years and I never ever knew that you get rings for rainbow rings. Okay, so don't hit any rainbow rings during this run. After this mini revelation, the rest of the stage was relatively smooth sailing apart from this one tiny little mistake. Don't take the middle one. That has never ever happened to me. With that done, we cleared Seaside Hill with relative ease and without collecting a single ring. Ocean Palace was up next, one of my favourite stages in the game, and this one went down relatively easy. There were a couple of moments where I had to think about what was actually going on and get a little bit creative, but beside that, it was pretty routine. It's such a great looking game, even like 20 years later. And also, technically, this is the most accurate game as far as translating that 2D art style goes, because the character models and all the shininess, looking like they've been dipped in pots of glue, it's actually trying to represent the highlights that were present on the drawings. A little art lesson for you. And obviously translating the classic formula of Act 1s and Act 2s, this is technically Act 2 of Seaside Hill, if you think about it like that. And Generation seems to think so, because it includes Ocean Palace as part of Seaside Hill. It's just one big act, separated into two zones. I miss this voice cast as well. Like, this voice cast was so good. Scott Dreyer as Knuckles is the best Knuckles. Tell me otherwise. Final part of the level now. Let's see how this goes for us, because we have to be Sonic, otherwise we are dead. Oh, we're dead. I'm loading my save state, because, you know, at least we're going to have some sort of points. That's the biggest fuck you ever from the game, saying like, yeah, no, you don't be Tails there. Yeah, okay. So now, this is the only issue. Everyone else is going to be picking up rings by default. That's their programming. So we need to try and I don't know, be as fast as we fucking can. Ah. Okay, that's progress. Ooh. Ah, Tails. Shit. I wonder, can we trigger the boulder to move? It turns out we can, and that's exactly what I did. So we got all the boulders to activate while we were stood behind them, so therefore all we had to do was slowly crawl to the goal ring with Tails, just to make sure we didn't run into the back end of them, and that is Ocean Palace with 0 rings. Naturally, I decided to also tackle the boss battles, so first up is Egghawk. This one was a difficult one at first because I considered it to be impossible from the get-go, considering that we essentially spawn on top of a ring. However, with a little bit of ingenuity and creative thinking and realising that we start the fight with 0 rings and not 1, we don't actually spawn on the ring directly, so we have time to move out of the way. And yes, that is possible. Going forward, the boss fight was as simple as can be, just don't touch a ring and watch what you're doing when you're punching Eggman. Smooth sailing to a completion with 0 rings. Stage 3, Grand Metropolis, fan favourite, beloved by many. This one didn't cause too many problems either, apart from a couple of silly little mistakes here and there, and a couple of sections caused a bit of difficulty, but other than that, once more, smooth sailing. It feels like every week a new rumour comes about of this game getting a remake as well, which oh, obstacle, Lightspeed Dash, nah. Yeah. There's like always a new rumour of this game getting remade every week, and I'm here for that, don't get me wrong. I really want a remake of Sonic Heroes, but based on how they handled Generations, you know, changing the script and everything like that, I don't want that for this game, because this game's got a great script already. Obviously the voice cast will have to be replaced, and that's a royal shame, because I love this voice cast to bits and pieces. They really bring these characters to life. Who grabbed that fucking ring? Yes. Oh shit. Oh, there's a spring, thank God. I was about to say, shit, that's a problem. Now, actually, I've just remembered, there is a section like that in Hein Castle, I think it is, where you are forced into a Lightspeed Dash. So, and I know it's a long Lightspeed Dash, it's part of the set piece. So that's going to be an issue when we get to it. What are you doing? Steady on. Careful, careful. And there we go. Grand Metropolis is done. Okay, so you might be wondering why my face has just taken up the entirety of your screen. Well, let's rewind and let me tell you why. You see this moment when the cat jumps onto the chair. It proceeds to then crawl onto the desk and hit the keyboard shortcut to make my OBS go into full cam mode, which is essentially only recording the webcam and not the gameplay anymore. So for the next roughly, I'd say 45 minutes, this was all that was captured, and that made me very upset, and this is the moment that I realised that. How long has that been like that? I lost almost 3 levels worth of footage, however, I'm an alpha gamer, so I decided to do it all again. In the name of content, I'll do it again. I'm not happy about it, but I'll do it again. So back to power plant I went. The first time around it caused me a little bit of difficulty, but having already figured out most of the routes and how to dodge a majority of the rings in the stage, it wasn't as bad on a second go around, so it wasn't all that bad in the long run. This was all well and good. However, while this was going on, I was completely oblivious to the issues the webcam was having, as you can see right now. It just began to glitch for no good reason, and it does this quite often. So before I managed to fix the problem, this had been going on for a while, so enjoy this instead. You hit that towards the right side. You need to touch that dash ring on its left side so that you don't end up running into the rings. You can ignore all these ones. Yeah, like that. There we go. One last little mini gauntlet. And we are home free. Lovely stuff. And that is how you do power plant ringless. Next we have our first rival fight, the battle against Team Rose, and this is where our first huge problem occurs. Unlike Egghawk where you drop onto a ring when the fight begins, this fight spawns you directly on top of a ring without any time to move out of the way. And no matter what you do, it is absolutely impossible to not pick this ring up. So therefore the challenge is deemed impossible, quite unfortunately. However, we're not going to stop. We're going to try and do this in as little rings as possible and the least rings ever documented on YouTube. So let's see how we got on with that instead. And I know just then I dropped a ring, okay? And if I finished the stage without that ring, I was not going to count that. We still technically collected a ring. Doesn't matter if we took damage, we collected a ring. Casino Park was up next, and this is where a majority of the problems began to arise. Of course, we have the unpredictability of the pinball physics in this game, with all 3 characters on the table at once, leaving rings susceptible to be picked up by any of them, including yourself. But that's only one part of the tale. The rest of it comes with this section here, with the big roulette wheel. For years, this has been thought impossible to get past without actually entering the wheel, and the wheel itself contains, I think, 12 rings, or just shy of that. Every YouTube video out there shows people always entering this roulette wheel, claiming it impossible to get past. So I made it my mission to find a way around it, as I was a firm believer that this gap was not too large to cross. So I spent a good, and I mean this, 1 hour and 45 minutes on this section trying to figure out how to get past it without entering the roulette wheel. I also just very rudely discovered by doing some research that the webcam had turned into a staticky mess, so I apologise for that. But anyways, I now have an idea of how to do this trick. It's a very rough idea. Never ever pulled it off before. Pulled it off. Oh, look at that. Okay, so this is... They just had to pick a ring up as soon as I had it, didn't they? There we go. Right, step. So the idea is to pop a team blast, and when we get over there, if we can get far enough, hopefully take advantage of our ability. To explain that a little bit better for everyone, essentially as Team Sonic, after you use a team blast, if you was to then try and pull off a tornado jump in front of an enemy, you would perform this massive pseudo homing attack on them and destroy everyone on the screen. So, my idea was that there is an enemy on this roulette wheel. If we could get close enough to the roulette wheel with a massively well-timed jump from Sonic, we could use this ability to launch ourselves onto the platform, destroying the enemy and sending ourselves straight down the tunnel without touching a ring. After about 20 minutes of experimenting, this is the moment that I realised my idea was actually quite fruitful. Case of my jump being wrong. We can tornado all the way out here. I just saw the prompt for B-Flash. This means the game has detected an enemy for us to lock onto with that ability. So this is where I knew I was onto something. and it was just a case of trial and error until we got another step further. I'm not getting anything out of this one either. And again, it spawns, it's within distance, but we get blocked. Just when all hope seemed lost, I hit a breakthrough. There is a piece of tech in this game known as, I think it's like ledge jump, which is where if you are to jump, if you do a kick off of a Oh! We fucking got it! We fucking got it! Too overjoyed by this discovery, I completely forgot that I had other teammates that also ended up on the roulette table as it began counting, as you just saw. And these two pass in front of me, go left and right, and have rings on them. So my next objective was to find a way onto the roulette table without anybody else following me. And there is no way to get your characters out of bounds in this stage of the level, so it is entirely down to luck whether or not we get on this table without collecting a ring. And this is why it took me so long to get any further. So we went left last time. It forced us to go left. Oh no, wait! Oh, I fucked up big time. We could have just dropped. I'm going to be careful not to hit them at the bottom, and then the rest of it's smooth sailing. This is possible. Fuck! I had it as well. After what felt like days, part of me wanted to give up because this was incredibly difficult to pull off, and it was entirely down to luck whether or not anyone else got on the table. But I persevered, and this was the winning attempt. Here we go. Oh. We've done it, 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 we've done it. It's done. It's done, it's done, we did it. It's possible. It's fucking possible. Oh, I am so fucking chuffed right now. I am so happy. You do not understand. Oh my fucking god. Probably world's first roulette table skip. I am so unbelievably happy with that. Unable to keep the bulge in my pants down, it was time to lock in and finish the level for good. And I'm happy to report the rest of the level wasn't all that difficult to get by without having to pick a ring up. Of course, the pinball sections were annoying as it also required luck, but thanks to the use of save states we didn't have to restart the entire level to go all the way back, as to get this in one go would be, well, pathetically lucky. But regardless to that, we carried on, we kept moving strong, and we finished the level without collecting a single ring. World's first casino park, 0 rings on YouTube. Eat your heart out. After what felt like the greatest victory of my life, we move on to Bingo Highway, the secondary stage of the casino levels, and with how hard the last one was, I was hoping this one wasn't going to cause me as many problems, and thankfully it didn't in the long run. A couple of sections here and there that required restarts because the ring placement wasn't ideal, or the slot machines again being unlucky, or the characters on the pinball tables, but beside that, the majority of the level was smooth sailing. That is until we got to the end of the stage and my heart shattered. Shit. It was at this point I was desperately looking for an answer to get past this section without having to go in that tunnel. Nowhere on the internet could tell me anything useful other than there was a skip earlier in the level, and even though I had tried that for a good hour, I could not get anywhere near close to pulling it off with how difficult it was. So I threw that idea aside, and I had to accept defeat. Bingo Highway was not possible without collecting rings, so the new plan was to minimise what we collected, being as little as possible in this tunnel, and then none on the table. Doing this without collecting a ring was relatively easy provided you threw the other two of your team members off the stage as soon as you left the tunnel, and after that we completed Bingo Highway with a total of only 3 rings collected, but I deciphered the minimum to be 2, I just couldn't be bothered to go back and do it without collecting the other one. Next up we faced the first arena fight of the game, Robot Carnival, and it was also here I remembered we spawned on top of a ring, much like the Team Rose fight, making it absolutely impossible to finish without collecting the ring. However, it is doable, much like Team Rose, to finish with only 1 ring provided you don't accidentally pick up any of the rings on the outside of the arena. The intense rail canyon came next, and this was one where I also feared we'd just randomly start picking rings up on the rails, so we played it safe again as Tails, moving at an absolute snail's pace throughout the entirety of the level to play absolutely safe, and by doing this, we got through the level relatively unscathed. I'm happy to report after only a couple of little knocks and restarts, Rail Canyon is one of the easier ones to complete without collecting any rings, and definitely should not have been the level brought back for Shadow Generations. Bullet Station, another one of my favourite stages. This one has some amazing set pieces, a great soundtrack, and all around a good time. Now, in terms of this challenge, getting around, not a problem. A couple of sections here and there that make you rethink your route and, plan accordingly. But it was smooth sailing until we reached the level's main set piece, and that is the big cannons that shoot you through a canyon. There are ring bubbles scattered everywhere in this section, and you can weave left and right to avoid them as well as spikes. However, in the first and second cannon section, there are a good few bubbles that are impossible to dodge. As well as the bobsleigh later in the level, there's roughly 5 rings that you cannot dodge. So you end up finishing this level with an eye-watering tally of 54 rings. And that is a massive hit to completing this game with as minimal rings as possible. To pile on the grief even further after that massive blow, we spawn on top of a ring at the start of the Egg Albatross fight, meaning that it's impossible to beat the fight with 0 rings. However, it's very easy to complete the fight without picking up any further, so we finished this fight with a total of 1 ring. After that shitfest, it was time to move on to a nicer atmosphere. Frog Forest is up next, another fan favourite stage. This one again has hardly any issues when you go through the stage normally. Most of the rings are dodgeable, the set pieces are avoidable, everything's all fine and dandy. That is until you get to your first section where you fly on these flowers, and that's where the problem arises. On this first section, the flower forces you to go into a ring balloon, and there is no way around it. You can't go up or down to avoid this balloon, so you are forced into collecting 5 rings. This is the only instance of this happening, however, so the rest of the stage after that is as simple as get to the goal ring. But it's still annoying that we can't complete the stage without any rings, considering how easy of a time the rest of the stage is. It's just this one automated sequence, and it's sequences like this that end up fucking us up on a lot, and I mean a lot, of areas in this run. Lost Jungle was very similar to Frog Forest in the vein of this challenge in that the terrain was quite easy to navigate, never had any problems when it came to accidentally picking up rings. However, there was one section that made me want to pull my hair out, and it was this triple rope swing into a balloon. No matter who you was, how far you could jump, there was no getting past this balloon without picking it up after the rope swing, so therefore we had to finish the stage with collecting 5 rings, which again is very annoying because the rest of the stage we go by relatively unscathed, and it feels like you're very proud of yourself for getting this far, just to be ruined at the end by a singular balloon. And of course we battle Team Dart next, which much like Team Rose, we spawn on top of a ring, making it doable by only collecting a singular ring. I was excited to play Hang Castle, after all it's one of the best levels in the game, but then I remembered something that I pointed out earlier. There is a section like that in Hang Castle, I think it is, where you are forced into a lightspeed dash. So, and I know it's a long lightspeed dash, it's part of the set piece, so that's going to be an issue when we get to it. As true as that was, this level likes to annoy us from the start as we are forced into collecting 5 rings on the opening stretch of the stage. Not much later in the level we encounter this door, and if we are to go around the long way, the intended path, we have to perform a lightspeed dash of approximately 30 rings to get to the switch to open the door. Now, there is this little trick you can do called door skip, which allows you to phase through the door, and it's quite easy to do. So we perform that, minimizing the rings we collect, and the rest of the level goes quite nicely until we get to the aforementioned lightspeed dash section. I tried to make a little jump out so we minimise the rings that we collect in this section, but due to the camera rotation in this section, it completely breaks the lightspeed dash, forcing us to take almost every single ring on the path. And this is where the ring count also goes up by an unhealthy amount. With no other issues going forward, Hang Castle is finished with an absolutely disgusting 56 rings, being the largest collected in any stage during this challenge. Mystic Mansion, my second favourite stage in the game. This one also went better than I expected for a majority of the run. Our first main obstacle came in the form of these bobsleigh sections. The platforming is fine, but as soon as you reach these things, there are problems because there are rings on the tracks, and of course you can't steer this one, it's an automated section. However, after a little bit of testing, I found out that you can perform frame-perfect jumps to land in between the rings and not pick one up. And that's exactly what I did. It took a good few tries, but we got there in the end. However, this hard work was in vain as we get to the end of the stage, and I remember in this little pumpkin room, to get into the final gauntlet of the level, you have to perform a light speed dash, and this is where our rings come from in the total from this level. And it's a royal shame as well because we did so well to get so far, only for it to come crashing down at the end. We finished Mystic Mansion with a grand total of 32 rings. Robot Storm, we already know the crack. It's exactly the same as Robot Carnival, so therefore we spawn on top of one ring and you just need to be careful to not collect any more going through it. So Robot Storm was doable in only one ring. Egg Fleet pisses us off in the same vein Hang Castle does by making us run into a line of rings as the stage begins. Thankfully it's only 4 this time instead of 5, however it's still quite frustrating. The rest of the level you'd expect to be quite difficult with all the rings littered everywhere and the jumping across rails and airships, but it was actually a relative breeze. I think I only had to load 2 save states throughout the entirety of the stage. So yes, Egg Fleet is actually one of the easier ones to complete ringless, believe it or not. We only have to collect 4 rings in that stage, and they're the 4 rings that we're forced to collect at the start of the stage, and that's relatively annoying because otherwise that stage is actually really easy to not pick a ring up on. And now the moment I was looking forward to the most in this playthrough. Final Fortress, my favourite stage in the game and perhaps my favourite stage in Sonic history. How did this one go down? Well, I'm actually quite surprised that it wasn't that bad. Fair enough, there aren't as many rings in this stage as there are in most of the other stages. However, with the boss arenas, well, mini-boss arenas, as well as the constant rail grinding with the rings that blend into the rails, a couple of light speed dashes here and there, this was all about picking out the right way to go to avoid the rings. And sure enough, knowing this level at the back of my hand, that was pretty easy to do. As the final level in the main campaign, we've passed the hard part and all we have left is one boss battle before we can find out how many rings it's possible to beat Team Sonic Story in. With that said, Final Fortress, we got a lovely perfect clear. Beautiful. Fuck. And now only one challenge stood in our way. Egg Emperor, and I thought we would spawn on top of a ring for this fight, but we actually don't. This is the first fight since Egg Hulk where we don't have that problem. Now the question is the rest of the fight doable without collecting any rings? Now given that the rings are only on a set path and they circle around the boss when it gets to the fighting arena, the answer is yes, because the balloons and everything else are totally optional. You just need to pray and hope that Tails doesn't fucking shoot them. That said, we finished Team Sonic's campaign on Egg Emperor with 0 rings collected.
You're finished, Eggman!
So, Sonic Heroes without rings in Team Sonic Story. Is it possible? Sadly, no. However, the results do vary across stages. Some you collect 0 rings whatsoever, and in other stages you are forced to collect quite a lot, and it's quite upsetting. So, I'm going to add them all up now, just while I waffle away to you. Thanks for watching this far. If you've made it this far, by the way, it means a lot. You know, we've been doing a lot of different things on this channel recently, and I've been sort of killing the second channel in the process. But, you know, we'll get there. Okay. Our grand total of rings we collected on our journey in Team Sonic Story is... Now, before we go any further, why don't we take a look at what the other 2 YouTubers who have attempted this challenge before, let's take a look at their final total. Cat Goblin's Game Review finished this with 253 rings collected in Team Sonic Story, which is actually a pretty commendable figure given that they did not discover the routes in Bingo Highway and Casino Park that I discovered. As far as Challenger Jakku goes, there was never a final figure given in his video, and granted that he's always switching between Team Sonic Rose and Dark's gameplay, we can't come up with a concrete figure, but I'm going to assume that it's roughly similar to that of Cat Goblin, mainly because of the constant shifting between stories to try and find one that has less rings on the path. So, with that being said, how many did we get? $166 is our final total, and that makes me very happy to be the person on YouTube that collected the least amount of rings while playing Sonic Heroes. Quite a niche flex, but here we are. First ever Casino Park 0 rings, lowest amount on Bingo Highway, and the lowest amount overall. Top dog, top dollar. Now, before we cut back to past me, I'd just like to say, you might have noticed this video got shortened down a lot after the Casino Park and Bingo Highway section. That's because I didn't want it to be 2 hours long. Bonsoir ladies and gentlefolk. About a month ago, we played Team Sonic's story, and we tried not to collect a ring, and it went a lot better than I expected. We pulled off the world's first Casino Park with 0 rings, and we have YouTube's current lowest ring count collected in Sonic Heroes. What a fucking achievement in my life. So I thought, why not do it again? But obviously we'll do it with the Dark story this time, because I actually had a lot of fun trying to do it, and this is going to be a bit more challenging for other reasons than Team Sonic. Not only do I now have an idea of what I'm doing, but Team Dark is essentially the hard mode of the game, in that their level layouts are a bit different. There are more enemies and whatnot, more hazardous falls, probably a few more light speed dashes here and there, which is just going to continue to increase the ring count. So I just want to see how far we can get, and of course they don't have the same Team Blast ability as Team Sonic, so we can't pull off any skips using the massive homing attack that they've got, which I've already forgotten the name of. But yeah, you get the gist. We're going again. So I'm just going to bounce right in. We'll go with Seaside Hill. So up first we have Seaside Hill, and unlike Team Sonic, this one starts us off in a precarious position in the fact that we run straight into a line of 4 rings. Oh, you're kidding me. No, we've just started the challenge. And as much as I tried, we cannot move our character. The only thing we can do here is spam the light speed dash, and of course that'll bring us into a ring. So straight off the bat, Team Dark is not possible without collecting a ring. So looks like we're going back to minimizing what we collect. On that note, minimizing rings in Seaside Hill after this is relatively easy. Much like Team Sonic, the layout is very similar, so dodging rings is a cakewalk. Now I know not to touch rainbow rings and all this other fancy stuff from last time, so we can just speed through the level with a good pace and get it over and done with, collecting a grand total of 4 rings. Not the ideal start, but it could have been a lot worse. It's really annoying. Wasting no time, we head straight over to Ocean Palace, and this one went quite similar to that of Team Sonic in that there wasn't really anything to trouble us in this stage when it came to collecting 0 rings. The primary difference was the stage difficulty itself, so it took a little bit longer to navigate and get through, but beside that, yet another cakewalk that we can finish quite easily. The main difference here is we can take advantage of Team Dark's Team Blast to be in Chaos Control. Upon clearing the screen on activation, it also freezes time for the 10 seconds it has left after a cooldown meter. And I thought of a clever idea to use this just before the boulder chase. This would freeze the primary rock in place so that we didn't have to worry about it hitting us during the first segment, so we could take our leisurely time, not collecting any rings, and then when the other 2 came by we can do what we did last time and just trigger their activation points and let them roll on forward. We finish Ocean Palace with a total of 0 rings. Egg Hook went exactly the same as it did in Team Sonic story. You have to start the boss by jumping backwards and then switching into flight formation so not to touch any rings. Move it forward, beat the shit out of the Egg Hawk. Job's a good one. Egg Hawk is finished with 0 rings. Everyone's favourite Grand Metropolis was up next, and once more this one went very similar to that of Team Sonic. The level was slightly longer, so it did take a bit longer to get through, but that is not a problem as the rings were very dodgeable. There are a couple of sections within the level that almost had me dead. No! Oh my god, what a save that was, Jesus Christ. And there was especially one point that had me double check my ring counter because I thought I picked rings up a lot earlier in the stage. When did I collect 3 rings? I'm just going to quickly look back at the footage and find out when I picked those up, because I don't recall when that was. Okay, so it turns out as soon as we got off that ramp that brought us to this room, there was some rings like right in front of the checkpoint, which we picked up. So I am going to go and commit die. But all that aside, Grand Metropolis was just another fun time as it always is, and we finished the stage with 0 rings. Power Plant gave us a challenge as soon as we started the stage, which was unexpected. We can't do the really cool... Uh-oh. Wait a minute, that's not good. Ooh, it's tight. Can we dodge that ring? Right, we'll start moving backwards. That doesn't work. Move sideways. Oh, this isn't looking good, bruv. Oh no, you've got even more if you move forward. There's got to be a direction we can move where we don't pick any up. Because I'm pretty sure it's just Omega that's picking it up. Let's analyse this. There we go. I bloody knew it. Yeah, some smart manoeuvring is how we get that. Yeah, I was going to say, no, guys, let's not do this. No, let's not do that. We're not here to do that today. There we go. Once I decided to lock in and actually concentrate on what I was doing, the rest of the stage was perfectly fine. We had a few moments that were similar to that of Team Sonic, where it took a little bit of smart thinking to get past, and in this case, a little bit more patience as we discover a new strategy to reduce the amount of resets. But all is said and done, Power Plant was yet another walk in the park, and we finished the stage with 0 rings. Quite unfortunately, we suffered the same fate with Team Dark's first rival battle of Team Chaotix. We spawned directly on top of a ring before we're even allowed to move, and we can't dodge it no matter what we do. Therefore, Team Chaotix is not possible without collecting a ring, and we finish it with 1 ring collected. Now, unlike that of Team Sonic, Casino Park presents us with roughly the same challenges, however, not the same solutions. As I mentioned earlier, the same sort of skip we performed on this stage is not possible. Roulette skip is not possible with Team Dark simply because their Team Blast ability does not let us perform this huge homing attack much like Team Sonic's did. Nope. So I knew from the get-go this stage would be impossible without collecting a ring, and the other question we had to ask ourselves after that was, how few can we do it in? And the answer proved to be tricky, because not only were there sections where we're forced into collecting rings like the roulette table, but there was also this one little section that I was dying to get past without collecting a ring. But unfortunately, after a couple of minutes, and when I say a couple of minutes, I mean about 20 minutes of trying to, I ended up picking 1 ring up. All these casino tables were an absolute bastard to try and get past without even touching them, let alone collecting a ring. It required a lot of luck in a lot of places to get off these tables without collecting a ring most of the time. But by the end of it, we had to touch the roulette and we had to touch this singular ring on this pulley, so therefore we finished the stage with 21 rings collected. Obviously nowhere near as good as 0, but I guess 21's not awful. Bingo Highway without a doubt was my least favourite part about this challenge. Straight away the stage starts with a big pile of roughly 9 or 12 rings that are pretty difficult to avoid. You essentially have to hug the left side of the casino table and pray to God that nobody goes smashing into them. And as soon as you finish that, you gotta hope these bumpers don't send you flying back up. And if you manage to avoid all that, on the left and the right side of this table, you've got 2 of these neon squares, and if you break either of them, they award you with 5 rings. So straight away we've got a problem. Not only do we have to not have touched these squares, which will require an insanely lucky bounce off these bumpers, but our other 2 companions aren't allowed to touch them either. I was stuck on this section for at least 33 minutes. The only way I managed to get past it was an insane amount of luck. I was ready to call it at 5 rings, but I eventually reached the bottom of it, only collecting, I believe, 1 or 2 rings. So I went back, tried again, and we eventually got the lucky run where we got to the bottom with 0 rings. Spawn, hurry up and spawn, hurry up and spawn. Oh, Shadow. Got it, we got it, 0 rings, let's go. Regardless, this was not fun. You stay there. That's interesting. Let's go. Yeah, they're stuck there, let's go. The stage carries on as normal. Dodging rings was a little bit difficult in a few areas, but nothing too strenuous. And just like Team Sonic, we hit Heartbreak at the end, where we have to go down the same tunnel and collect the same 2 rings as we did in Team Sonic's story. And it is absolutely gut-wrenching to get this far trying so hard just to be shut down by this obstacle. I know there was a skip in Team Sonic's story that allows you to bypass these rings entirely, but it's incredibly difficult to pull off, and I wasn't about to try it for Team Dark either. So we finished Bingo Highway with a grand total of 2 rings. Say it with me now, Robot Carnival also has you spawn on top of a ring, just like Team Sonic's story. Clearing out the robots without touching any of the surrounding rings in this story was a little bit more challenging, but that's to be expected with it being the hard mode, but we still get through it with only collecting a single ring. Rail Canyon once again is another one that isn't exactly an obstacle. It just requires a little bit of tricky footwork in a few places, but other than that, an absolute breeze. I had a lot more fun with Team Dark's version of Rail Canyon knowing what I had to do now. Of course, in some instances it was a little bit more tricky, but again, that is to be expected. I discovered a couple of routes that I've actually never taken before, so it was nice to learn something new while playing through this stage, which is otherwise getting a bit bland having played it for so many years and it being a little bit less on the interactive side. But regardless, Rail Canyon is finished with 0 rings. One of my favourite stages in the game was once again one of my least favourite for this challenge. Bullet Station provides the same issues that it had in Sonic's story. We soon encounter our first cannon section of Team Dark's version of the stage, and we are forced to collect 15 rings within this section. We keep moving on as normal, but not long after that we encounter a lightspeed dash over a massive pit. There is no way around this, so we are forced into taking the lightspeed dash and collecting a good number of rings in doing so. The next cannon section was literally right around the corner, and this one also forces us to collect a good bit of rings. Not 15, but 10 this time. No matter how many times I went back through it, 10 was the absolute minimum I took out of this section. Thankfully though, we was given a little bit more breathing room this time, as the bobsleigh section doesn't actually force you into collecting any rings. So we was able to finish Bullet Station with what is still an eye-watering tally of 47 rings. A huge dent in this challenge. And of course, the Egg Albatross is exactly the same as it is in Team Sonic's story. And again, this was another easy fight. It's just a shame we have to spawn on top of a ring. So we finished this fight with 1 ring collected. We got to take a break next and go to Frog Forest, which was an easy stage in Team Sonic's campaign. The only problem is that we was forced to collect 5 rings through one of these balloons. However, Team Dark doesn't have this problem. We are forced into collecting absolutely fuck all here. So we can just play the stage as normal, just make sure we dodge any rings that are on the path. Exactly as intended in this challenge. We finished Frog Forest with a total of 0 rings and 0 headaches. Moving straight into Lost Jungle. Lost Jungle has the same properties as Frog Forest in that we are also not forced into collecting any rings on these balloons this time. Team Dark seems a little bit more lenient when it comes to this challenge and these balloons and scripted sequences in comparison to Team Sonic. The rest of the level plays out as normal, more tricky platforming here and there, but not a problem. The key difference being here, as soon as I finished my Team Sonic playthrough and it was uploaded to YouTube, I had a look at everyone else's runs, as I probably should have done this beforehand, but it turns out the balloon that gifted me the 5 rings in Lost Jungle can actually be avoided with a very tight and precise timing in order to weave your way just past it. If I would have known this sooner, I would have done this in Team Sonic's story, however, well, I didn't know. Let's fucking go. So with this new knowledge in mind, I'm able to finish Lost Jungle with no rings collected. Now, oddly enough, the rival fight against Team Sonic does not pan out the same way it does against Team Dark in Team Sonic's story. Team Sonic is the only team in this fight to spawn on top of a ring, and you can actually hear that ring being stood on as soon as the fight begins. The ring that Team Dark is gifted at the start of the fight is standing right in front of them. We don't actually pick a ring up, but they do. It's your choice whether or not you walk into this ring. You've just got to jump around it if you don't want it. So with that being said, you play the fight as normal, and Team Sonic is in fact beatable without collecting a ring. The first rival fight we're able to do this for. Why is this the case? I have no fucking clue, but I'm not going to complain, because the less rings, the merrier. What was with that hedgehog that looked like my twin? I was absolutely dreading returning to Hand Castle with how it treats us in Team Sonic's story. It forces you into collecting a lot of rings, otherwise it would be a relatively easy stage to get by. Not only do you have to start the stage by collecting these 5 rings, which you also can't avoid much like the start of Seaside Hill, but when you get further along the stage you can pull off these nice jumps to, skip a long lightspeed dash. You can do the door skip to avoid running into a lot of rings on your way there. I probably would have got around to doing this challenge like a hell of a lot sooner, but I've just spent a lot of my free time recently playing Shadow Generations. Genuinely was my favourite game of last year. So I've been playing a lot of Shadow Generations, and specifically been modding it on PC, because Jesus Christ, when I played it on console I was like, yeah, this is good, but there's just a few things that, I don't like so much. But obviously modders come along and they do their thing and make the game like, they make it fun in some areas where it wasn't in the base game, or they just make it funny to look at with certain mods. Modders are the saving grace of the Sonic community sometimes, and I mean that. So I've just been playing the game modded quite a lot, so you should probably, if you haven't already, check out the base game, but if you want to check out mods, I do recommend CD Keys to get yourself a copy of Shadow Generations really cheap, because that's what I did. You can check the description, I'll have that link there so you can get to see the keys nicely. There's absolutely no issues. You just get to this long lightspeed dash like Team Sonic story where you can't do anything but take it. You can try and minimise the rings you collect through it, and that's exactly what we had to do. Otherwise, Hang Castle is a relatively easy stage and it's just a good time all around, much like Team Sonic. It's a shame that it gets bogged down with these mandatory rings. We finished Hang Castle with a total of 57 rings. Youch. Once again, Mystic Mansion is in the same vein as Team Sonic story in that it's impossible to complete without collecting a ring. You're able to dodge a majority of the rings that they set out on your path. However, you do get to these trolley sections where you need to make frame-perfect inputs to get past these rings. And while I was able to do it for the first trolley section, the second one was not so forgiving. I was spent long time on this section and I was not able to get past it with 0 rings. So I had to eventually settle for 1 ring. It might be possible, it might not be. I don't remember how I did it for Team Sonic if I did manage to get 0, but put it this way, you're more than welcome to try because this is a lot harder than it looks. And of course, we get to the final room of the stage where you get into this, really trippy area and you have to take a massive lightspeed dash to get to the outside of it. It's unavoidable, we figured that out with Team Sonic, but we minimise our rings collected in this area and go on to finish it as normal, finishing the stage with 29 rings collected and another broken heart. Robot Storm is up next, and much like Robot Carnival, we are spawned on top of a ring and we can't do anything about it, so we just got to accept our fate and move on. Up next we have Egg Fleet, and again like Team Sonic we are forced to start by running into 4 rings. Unavoidable in every sense of the fashion, so what can you do? The rest of the stage goes on as normal, a lot trickier than Team Sonic's, but that is to be expected. But beside that, this is also the stage, maybe a bit too late, that I figured out where target switches are actually random in what they give you. Sometimes they might give you rings, sometimes they might give you Team Blast, sometimes they'll give you power-ups. It's entirely random what you get from these target switches, and I never knew that. So if I would have known that sooner, maybe we could have reduced our ring count in other stages. Beside that, Egg Fleet is finished with 4 rings collected. On to Final Fortress now, as I've stated, my favourite stage in franchise history, and once again glad to report that it is absolutely possible to finish this stage without touching a ring. And much like Egg Fleet, this one is a lot harder than it is in Team Sonic story to do so. But as a master of Sonic Heroes, it didn't take me long to figure out what I needed to do to get past it, so we finished Final Fortress with 0 rings. Last but not least, final boss of the story, Egg Emperor. And this one is almost identical to that of Team Sonic story. There's just a few tougher enemies to dodge here and there, but just like Team Sonic, it's a cakewalk. Do the Team Blast glitch to build up the Team Blast, pop that thing, and then beat the shit out of Eggman when you can. Finish off the fight with a grand total of 0 rings collected. And that's where we conclude Team Dark Story. So in the end, how many rings did we collect? Was it more or less than Team Sonic? Well, let's tally it up. We finished Team Dark Story with a grand total of 168 rings collected, just 2 more than that in Team Sonic's. Gluten Targan everybody. Okay, we're 2 campaigns deep into this no ring challenge, so of course we're going to attempt Team Rose today. And rather than starting on the stage select screen, we're going to start here, simply because Team Rose has to play Seagate as part of their campaign. Now, of course, I'm not playing through this as a campaign, I'm just going through stage select to make my life easier. But for the sake of loading a save state, for the sake of this video, I'll be playing through Team Rose at the start as a campaign just to play through Seagate, and then we'll be going back to how it was. So off we go with the most obnoxious tutorial in video game history, Seagate. The level itself, as you can guess, no issues absolutely anywhere. There's a very scarce amount of rings in the stage, all things considered. However, there is one big problem, and that is Big himself, because he's a fucking unit. Look at the size of him. When we get to this one tunnel later on in the stage, you have to destroy it open using Big's power attacks, and if you so much as do a belly flop or you send the characters through the tunnel, they're going to pick rings up. So we had to try and find a way to maneuver this tunnel without picking up rings, and we couldn't use Cream because for whatever reason the hit collision goes really dodgy when we start to use Cream's formation in Team Rose's story, simply because Big is that huge, his collision is rubbing off of every wall left, right and centre, so we can't exactly make precise manoeuvres using flight formation this time around, and that's a problem. So instead we have to make our manoeuvres using Big and his version of Knuckles' boxing gloves. Every power character in this game has a different type of let's call it an idle power mode, where you can get your characters ready to attack, but you haven't actually sent them out to attack yet. Knuckles uses its boxing gloves, as well as Omega. Vector and Big put their characters on their shoulders or in their mouth respectively, and then we'll go ahead and use them as fireballs. So in relation to this tunnel, we're going to have to get our characters on Big's shoulders and then walk through it very slowly, but the issue is we still have to break open the ruins, and when we try and do this, they get sent into rings, and I tried this for a long time, and the fewest amount of rings I got out with was 2 rings. So off the bat, if we're going to count Seagate, Seagate is impossible without collecting a ring, and therefore Team Rose's story is already impossible without collecting a ring. What a start. We finished Seagate with 2 rings. Now we can get back to the main game, Seaside Hill. Now, I was also annoyed at the start of this stage, much like Team Dark, as we are forced to collect some rings. However, it's not as bad as it was with Team Dark, because we get control over the team as we hit the second ring, and even though it's still bad to start with 2 instead of 0, I guess it's not full like the game wants it to be, so we can at least skate around the rings. But later on in the stage we get to the bobsleigh section, and of course we are forced to collect rings here as well, with it being easy mode and whatnot. There's a line of 3 ring bubbles, and each of them contain a different value of rings, so it took about 2 attempts to find the one with the least, which was 5. The rest of the stage goes on as normal, not a problem, and we finished the stage with 7 rings, which for the first 2 stages, 9 rings, it felt like a bad omen and a sign of things to come. Thankfully, Ocean Palace decided to take a break from giving us mandatory rings and lets us explore a little bit. The whole stage, I kid you not, is almost identical to that of every other story we've played so far, apart from there are less rings, believe it or not, and it was not a problem whatsoever. Apart from when we got to the turtles at the end, it took a couple of regos to figure out which foot formation to enter the cannon as so that we didn't get launched into ring bubbles, but beside that, Ocean Palace was an absolute breeze, and we finish it with 0 rings. The same can be said about Egghawk. Of course, this is going to be a repetitive thing I'm going to end up saying now, but Egghawk, again, you just jump away from the rings at the start, and you go and chase the machine, take it to the middle, and absolutely wail on it, and have it finished in literally less than a minute. 0 rings. Happy days. Grand Metropolis was one of the easiest levels in this run to collect 0 rings on. The stage itself is modelled very similar to that of the other stories, however, there are again less rings, and of course with the stage being cut in almost more than half, there's absolutely no chances to pick up rings in areas that might be considered difficult. The only slightly tricky part was just before the goal ring, but that's just because of the size of Big the Cat once again. But we finished this one again without any problems and with 0 rings. Same applies to Power Plant. Not only does this one not have as many scripted sequences or as many rings in areas that are difficult to see, it's mainly just destroy the enemy and move forward, and that's exactly what we did, getting us to the end of the stage without a problem at all. Power Plant is finished with 0 rings. Now this is where I expected us to pick up our mandatory ring for each section, and to my surprise, Team Rose starts this boss fight without picking a ring up. This happened in Team Dark story as well. For whatever reason, Team Sonic is the only team in these fights to pick a ring up on start. If you fight Team Sonic, you're not picking a ring up. If you fight Team Chaotix, you are picking a ring up. It's quite interesting how these characters' spawns alter depending on who they fight, but I'm not going to complain because we finished this fight with 0 rings and 0 shots fired either. Returning back to my biggest achievement, yet also my worst nightmare, Casino Park, was an experience that went very similar to Team Dark, I won't lie. The roulette table again is unskippable, so therefore we are picking up 20 rings in this stage, but the actual pinball tables themselves I found myself having a lot less trouble with this time despite the size of Big the Cat. I thought this was going to be a bit more challenging trying to manoeuvre Big around these unescapable rings and neon signs that grant you rings, but surprisingly wasn't that bad. But regardless, we finished the stage with 20 rings, which again is only just from the roulette table. It is a bit upsetting, but what can you do? My next worst nightmare, Bingo Highway, was also not as bad as expected. Of course, we start on the same pinball table as the last story, where we start with a massive line of rings to avoid, which surprisingly we got around quite easily, and then we have to get down the rest of the table without destroying any neon signs or picking up a giant box. But this section I was only stuck on for at least 2 or 3 minutes. It went surprisingly well, as Big the Cat killed himself at the start of the stage, and Amy and Cream being small enough to weave between the rings was not a problem at all. The rest of the stage went on just fine. The other pinball tables weren't too offensive. We was able to pull off the same trick of getting our other party members stuck on these bouncing little prongs or whatever they are, so that they didn't have to join the table with us, and Cream could just go off and venture the tables on her own. Bingo Highway was stress-free, and we didn't have to go to the tunnel at the end of the stage either. That forces us to collect rings, so therefore we have our first Bingo Highway with 0 rings. Hallelujah. Robot Carnival continues the trend of making me sad by spawning us on top of a ring, but the rest of the fight itself isn't bad at all, and I even had less trouble even accidentally picking rings up this time, so yeah. 1 ring and a broken heart. Sweet Sweet Rail Canyon, much like the other stories, didn't cause me any problems here. A couple of buggy deaths here and there, but that's only my own fault for trying to take some skips here and there. But beside that, Rail Canyon, again, not a problem for this challenge. Rings are easily avoidable, and the stage being cut in half as well. There's so much less opportunity to collect rings in areas where it felt a lot harder to avoid. So yeah, Rail Canyon, more than possible with 0 rings. Bullet Station, again, was not my friend. The rest of the stage is perfectly fine, apart from these sections with the cannons. Now, thankfully, Team Rose's version only has one of these scripted sequences, and during this sequence we are forced into collecting 20 rings. No matter who we enter these cannons as, we're always picking up 20 rings. And while that is a big shame, it is what it is, unfortunately. So Bullet Station in Team Rose's story was finishable with 20 rings at a minimum. Now, if you want this game to be any more confusing, Team Rose Egg Albatross does not spawn you on top of a ring. It in fact spawns you in the middle of these rings. Why does it do that? I have no idea, but it makes them avoidable, and all my problems have been laid to rest. Egg Albatross is finally beatable without picking a ring up. Frog Forest once again served as a euphoric break from all the action, and we can just speed through this stage as you would on a normal playthrough. There are very little rings on the footpath that pose any threat of even being picked up, let alone any unscripted sequences. Everything is totally avoidable, and the stage is a good time as it was designed to be. Frog Forest is doable without picking a ring up. Moving on to Lost Jungle, a stage that caused me issue with Team Sonic but not Team Dark. I decided to learn from my replay and use the same strategies I used in Team Dark's playthrough to get through the stage without collecting rings. That mainly came from this scripted sequence with the vines. You don't have to take the final vine in this story, you can completely bypass it and then just make a very well timed jump to make a skip happen where you jump out of the flight animation and get an extra little bit of height from it so that it's possible to clear this gap. After that, the stage is more than doable, it's super easy, and we finish Lost Jungle with 0 rings. Now, as I said earlier when it came to the team battles, if you're fighting Team Chaotix, you're probably going to pick a ring up, and guess what? We pick a ring up. I don't know why it's like this for certain fights in this campaign, but for whatever reason, we have to pick a ring up against Team Chaotix, but we didn't have to pick rings up against Team Sonic. So, Team Chaotix, unfortunately, we have to pick a ring up, but it's all well and good because it's only 1 ring. Hang Castle was a ridiculously easy time, and I can't stress that enough. Hardly any rings in the stage as it is, and those that are in the stage are very avoidable. The ring bubbles aren't laid in the path whatsoever, and you can get through the stage without having to perform any sort of skip like we had to in the other stories. The only time that I had any sort of issue was at the end of the stage when I accidentally died because I tried to do something stupid, and I just didn't get on with the level as normal. But again, that was a stupid minor inconvenience of a death. Hang Castle is possible without collecting a ring. Mystic Mansion, I feared it would be more like the other stories where we would have had to collect a lot of rings. However, that's when I remember Team Rose has shorter levels and we have nothing to worry about because we don't enter the trippy room. The closest we get to being forced into collecting rings is on the bobsleigh section, where we're forced to collect 10 rings from this first balloon during the introductory section to this bobsleigh. We still have to make frame perfect jumps across the other rings like in the other stories, but beside that, Mystic Mansion is an absolute cakewalk, and we finished that one with 10 rings. Yada yada yada, Robot Storm is just like the other stories where you have to collect a ring at the start, and therefore it's impossible to finish without 0 rings, but it's more than possible to finish with 1. Here we go, Egg Fleet. Once again starting with the same issue as the other stories, we are forced to collect 4 rings in the beginning of the stage after we exit the ship. I was expecting this, so I wasn't too down by it. The rest of the stage, however, is quite easy. It just requires a little bit of careful manoeuvring on some of the fans where there's rings in the way, but beside that, Egg Fleet, just like in the other stories, is possible with only collecting 4 rings. Again, it is a downer, but we've got to take what we can get. Final Fortress, where Journey meets its end. Much like the other stories, again doesn't pose much of a problem to the player. This is one of Team Rose's shorter stages and easier stages, which is quite surprising considering it's the final stage. There's not many rings lying about on the stage apart from on the rails where they blend in, so you just need to be aware of where they are and jump over them. But beside that, the combat's easy. There's nothing, like I said, that forces you to collect any rings. And before you know it, you're on the way to the goal ring after this final grinding section. You're not going to get caught in the way of any rings or rainbow rings because they're easily avoidable. Final Fortress, is finishable with 0 rings. Home stretch now, Egg Emperor is identical to that of the other stories in that you just avoid the rings at the start of the stage, yada yada, you chase him down, you go to the arena, smack the shit out of him, spam the homing attack, spam the team blast, spam the thunder shoot, anything that you can do to take him down, it really isn't a big problem. And of course, that means Egg Emperor is finishable without collecting a ring, and Team Rose's story comes to a close. Alrighty then, with all that said and done, that was a relatively short playthrough as to be expected. However, I expected it to be a lot more difficult in terms of the rings. Considering this is easy mode, you'd think they'd be dishing out rings left, right and centre, but as a matter of fact they're not. And we finish with 66 rings, which is 100 less than both of the other respective stories, which is quite the difference. And that is mainly from the stages being shorter, because scripted sequences that give us the rings, such as, you know, Bullet Station's Cannon, or just the general tables of Casino Park, being the roulette table and whatnot, those extra rings are awarded for absolutely no reason. Essentially, just the stages are longer in the other stories, and that's why so much more is given. There's more time to collect rings. That is simply it. You remove half the fat of the playthrough and you collect 100 less rings. It's as simple as that. So currently Team Rose leads with 66 rings. Now as far as Team Chaotix are going to go, well, there's missions that require you to collect rings, and an absurd amount of them at that. So I already know they're going to be the most. However, if I can find any glitches to get around it, I will. But as far as that goes, that's Team Rose's story. Is it possible without rings? No. But it's possible with less than 100 if that's any consolation. Hello everybody and welcome to the final part of our Sonic Heroes No Ring Challenge. Up to now, Team Rose takes the lead with the least amount of rings collected in a story, so we're going to now today see if it's possible to do this with Team Chaotix. I already know that it's going to be impossible, simply because I am positive that in one of their stages, I think it's Casino Park, you are forced to collect, I think it's like 300 rings. So unless there's a glitch to get around it, it ain't happening, Chief. But that's why we're here today, to see if it's possible.
Seaside Hill.
Right, so after I stopped being autistic, Seaside Hill is the location. In Team Chaotix story, you are forced into mission mode. Rather than just simply getting to the goal ring, you have to do a variety of tasks. Seaside Hill has us collect 10 hermit crabs. Why? Why the fuck not? This went as about expected. If you know where the locations of these crabs are, it's a piece of piss. There's not very many rings that get in your way, so avoiding them is also a piece of piss. We finish Seaside Hill with 0 rings. Ocean Palace is a glorified version of Get to the Goal Ring, as we have to traverse through a majority of the stage and find a lost Chow at the end of it. And it's as simple as it sounds, literally just get to the end and bust open the cage and rescue the Chow. Not a problem whatsoever, a couple of tricky rings here and there, but no biggie in the end. We finish Ocean Palace with 0 rings. Egg Hulk works exactly the same as it does in the other stories, in that you just jump backwards at the start to avoid the rings that they place in front of you, and then you go on to wail on the boss in the middle, and job's a good one. We finish Egg Hulk with 0 rings. Grand Metropolis is up next, and this is where people have problems with Team Chaotix. The third mission in the game makes you destroy every enemy on the stage, and there's 85 of them. That sounds like a monumental task for only the 3rd level, but believe me, it's not that bad. Provided you don't stray too far off the path and you follow along where the game wants you to go, you'll be just as good as gold. We finish Grand Metropolis with 0 rings. Power Plant has you destroy 3 golden turtles, and of course these are enemies that are apparent in every story apart from Team Rose, I believe. However, there's a small catch with this one. At first when I played the stage, I finished it with 5 rings, assuming it was impossible to beat this one without shooting all these targets, as I thought that's how you unlock the cage. But it turns out, after a bit of digging, you only need to shoot one specific target to unlock the cage. And as we discovered in previous stories, these targets grant you completely random items, whether or not that's rings, or 1-up, or Team Blast. So we just had to keep shooting it on a reset until we got it without rings, and we sure enough did. So that brings us to the end with 0 rings. Team Doc's another rival fight where we don't spawn on top of a ring by some miracle. I don't know why this is apparent in some stages and some that it's not, but for whatever reason, we get off lucky this time and we finish Team Doc without collecting a ring. And just as I said in the intro, this is where things went tits up. Casino Park has you collect 200 rings as the mission. I remember years ago I saw some kind of a glitch or a video where you was able to restart the stage and gaslight the game into thinking that you finished the stage and you could complete it instantly with 0 rings or anything like that. However, I could not find this video anywhere for the life of me, and I also could not replicate what I thought I saw all those years ago, so I was forced into playing the stage as normal, just making sure to not end in a slot machine because you can go over the 200 tally. So we very carefully collected 200 rings. Oh dear. I think that quite obviously means this is impossible. But we're going to try and minimise the rest of them anyway. Bingo Highway was thankfully not as much of a bastard as it was in the other stories. We don't spawn on a bingo table. As a matter of fact, the game lets us off easy at the start before we ease into things. And it was in an earlier stage where I discovered that Espio's tornado attack, I completely forgot about this, turns him invisible, and this leaves behind the rest of your party. And of course, as you found out if you've seen the other videos, which if you haven't, you should, the party just balloons absolutely everywhere because the AI in this game is not, well, it's not very good. They just go anywhere and everywhere and they are programmed to collect rings quite idly. So by leaving them behind, they could not move at all. So you're able to run along on your own and complete these stages as the speed character from, well, a majority of the stages anyway, as the speed character and get through them a lot faster than slogging around as the flight character, a mechanic I definitely abused. But anyways, we move on with Bingo Highway and we use that mechanic to our advantage on the bingo tables by leaving behind Vector and Jarmy so we can go on them alone as Espio, which means we have a tiny hitbox and we're able to collect these chips without the risk of destroying any unnecessary neon signs or picking up any unnecessary rings. And we finish the stage with 0 rings. Robot Storm and Robot Carnival I'm going to cover in the same go. Yes, of course, they're exactly the same as they are in the rest of the stories, and we cannot finish them without forcefully picking up the ring that it spawns us on. So we finish them both with a ring each. Rail Canyon's next, and this is one of the only normal stages in this campaign, where all we need to do is get to the gold ring. And thank God for it, because Rail Canyon is a really fun stage in this campaign, because in one of the coolest aspects of this campaign, they have unique level design in quite a few stages, and this is one of them. This is quite a fun interpretation of the stage in my opinion. It's quite balanced in its difficulty, and it's got enough unique set pieces in comparison to the other ones to be, you know, pretty fun. There's not many rings around either that you're going to probably pick up on accident, and I don't think I had to do a single restart. Rail Canyon was finished with 0 rings. Bullet Station has proved to be the bane of my existence in every story so far, so let's see if we can rectify that here. Of course, if you're unaware, the main gimmick of this stage is these huge ass cannons that are present throughout the entire stage as decoration until you eventually infiltrate one of those bases and fire yourself out of said cannon. Now of course, as you duck and weave between all the balloons in these canyons, you can only move left and right. So that means when there's a balloon in the centre, you're pretty fooked. And of course, there just had to be 2 of them in this instance. So we're forcibly collecting the balloons. Thankfully, they only contain 5 rings and no more. But as far as that goes, that means we can finish the stage with 10 rings. Which is, again, no good. Egg Albatross, like the other stories, spawns us on top of a ring and we can't do anything about that, so we finish that boss with 1 ring. Frog Forest was very similar to that of Rail Canyon, apart from it had a twist. We had to actually use this SBO mechanic that we've been abusing the whole time and use that to get to the end of the stage, because if any of these frogs spot us, we gotta restart. It's a really cool stage gimmick that I quite enjoy. The later stage, Egg Fleet, also does the same thing, and I think it's one of the funnest levels in the game. As far as it goes for the no ring challenge, well, everything was all well and good, we was getting by nice and easy, until we get to these flowers, which, the same in Team Sonic's story, we have to just fly into 1 balloon. We're forced into it. There's no way around it. We can't bridge the gap between here and the vine, so unfortunately we have to collect this balloon and finish the stage with 5 rings. A similar theory applies to Lost Jungle in that it gave me Team Sonic syndrome. Unlike the other stories where we found out that we can avoid using these vines to go underneath this balloon and not pick up the rings in the balloon, for some reason this story has 1 less vine and 1 less platform, which makes the jump even larger, and I was unable to get past it after all my trying, so I eventually had to give up and collect the 5 rings in this balloon. The rest of the stage was perfectly fine, as the 10 shells are super easy to find as there's plenty scattered in the stage, which is a shame. We finished Lost Jungle with 5 rings. Team Rose is yet another boss fight where you don't spawn on top of a ring for whatever miraculous reason. so that makes it nice and easy to finish without picking up a ring. Handcastle was up next. Footage you're about to see, it might look a bit quicker because I actually had to play this stage again, because during my recording of the initial stage and Mystic Mansion, the recording just died. It turns out my hard drive got full, so that lost a lot of footage, so we went back and we did it again. But as far as Handcastle goes, we need to go and scour for 10 keys. There's only 10 on the map, so you can't miss a single one of them, and considering this was my second run through the level, I managed to miss one. How? I have no idea, but I know which one I missed, so finding it weren't too bad. But picking up rings in this stage is next to impossible, provided that you're just not being stupid, essentially. There's no ring bubbles that, are in the way. Everything's just layering around on the floor, so you're totally fine. We finished this stage with 0 rings. Mystic Mansion has been a stage that has caused us some problems. I've mitigated to mention this in the previous video and this one so far, but Team Rose and Team Chaotix do not possess the ability to do the Lightspeed Dash, and that is an ability that has caused us plenty of issues in some stages in the other stories. So thankfully Mystic Mansion gets rid of that stupid fucking trippy room that it has at the end of Team Dark and Team Sonic's story for this level. Instead, this stage has us do the worst mission in the game in extinguishing 60 red torches. And how do we do this? We have to turn Espio invisible by doing his tornado attack, and very slowly and painfully rinsing and repeating until it's done. This is about as fun as it sounds. Thankfully though, as I am a master of this game and I have years of experience underneath my belt and I know every last little secret, this is a mechanic that surprisingly little people know about. If you get your speed character to level 3, their homing attack will produce a gust of wind. If you've ever noticed this as a level 3 speed character and you've hit an enemy and it doesn't die straight away, chances are they'll fly in the air. You can also use this ability to jump on these tornado poles without having to do the tornado jump. You can just home and attack into them and you'll go spinning. So I thought, what if we try that with the torches? If we were to home and attack the torch as level 3 Espio, does it distinguish it? And yes, it does. So thankfully we can save a lot of time by doing that and just run around as Espio completely invisible without anyone else following us, because they can accidentally pick rings up, as they did a lot early in the stage while I was working towards level 3. But thankfully we can finish Mystic Mansion for the first time with 0 rings. Egg Fleet's up next, and unlike the other stories, we do not start on the battleship that the cutscene takes place on. It just drops us in the middle of nowhere, and like I said earlier, we just got to get to the end of the stage without being spotted. This is again an incredibly fun challenge, probably my favourite stage in Team Chaotix's story, and one of my favourite in the game for that matter. However, everything was all well and good until we got to the end. The game gaslights you into thinking you need to use the Team Blast to take out this robot without being detected. But for whatever reason, I'm not sure if this is why this is the case or not, I didn't test it, but if you was to use Espio and tap the square button, much like you do the Rocket XL for other characters, he throws a shuriken before he gets a burst of speed. And when I hit the enemy with this shuriken, it didn't seem to respond, but I began to home and attack the enemy and nothing happened. It just let me wail away on it until it broke. Now the other enemies, the egg pawns in this stage, if you was to do that, would detect you and you'd have to restart. Whether or not the shuriken somehow fucked up the coding on this robot or it stunned it, I do not have a fucking clue. But I will not complain because we finish Egg Fleet with 0 rings. The last stage of the game, Final Fortress, is exactly the same as Handcastle in that we have to collect keys. However, this stage only possesses 5 rather than 10. And it, again, is another stage that you can just go through as normal. You don't have to pick any rings up. Everything's all nicely laid out for you on the floor, so you're not going to have many issues picking them up. Just don't jump into the bubbles and everything's hunky-dory. And we finish the stage with 0 rings. Last but not least, Egg Emperor once again is a stage that you don't spawn on any rings, and the only thing you have to do is avoid them when you get to fighting the boss when it gets to the middle of the arena and as you're running along to chase it. Now, I believe that Team Chaotix personally has the hardest version of this fight, because for whatever reason the cannons feel more aggressive, there's harder enemies in the middle to avoid. It just feels like a souped up version of the fight for whatever reason, and I can't quite explain it. Considering these guys aren't hard mode, it sure feels like it. The Egg Emperor goes as normal and you finish it with 0 rings. Okie dokie then, with all that said and done, we've now got our grand totals for every single team. And of course, Team Sonic, we collected 166. Team Dark, we collected 168. Rose, we collected 66. And the Eye Waterer is Team Chaotix, and the only reason it's this bad is because of Casino fucking Park. If that level had a skip where you could just somehow tell the game, I ain't collected no rings, but you have collected the rings possible for it, then you could technically finish it in 0 with glitches. I'm more than sure, I couldn't find a video, but I'm positive back in the day I saw a video where you collected the amount of rings you needed, and then you restarted the stage on the frame you beat the level, and it would count and you'd beat the stage with 0 rings. I don't recall if that's true or if I'm making shit up, but I recall seeing something like that back in the day. But anyways, I tried it, I couldn't pull it off. So we finished Team Chaotix with 223 rings, and if that skip did exist, we would only finish it with 23, which would not be too bad. So, and just out of curiosity, because I don't remember if there's any rings in the first stage of the final boss. I know, obviously, Supersonic, you start with rings and they drain. I want to see if it's possible to beat the last story without collecting a ring while we're here, because it's only literally a boss fight. That's all it is. There's no stage. So, as far as Metal Madness goes, I don't remember. But I know Metal Overload, you need to collect rings and bubbles to keep yourself going before you die. So let's see what we can do, because theoretically we could just spam the Team Blast glitch. We spawn on a fucking ring. What does it matter? It's ridiculous shit. Fuck this game. With my hopes and dreams crushed in an instant, we decide to truck on anyway and see what we can do. Now, the thing is with Metal Madness, and I didn't account for this, when you're wailing away at his core, eventually when you finish, he's going to knock you back and thrust you into the middle of the arena so that you can phase out and phase into the next team. And of course that means being flung into the rings that are in the middle. We might spawn on top of any random ring, however, when you get flung into them, it's completely down to chance where you land. And no matter how many times I went back, we always collected rings. So we had to just essentially just firm it and see if we got lucky and didn't collect many rings by the end of it. So by the end of it with Team Dark, there's hardly any in the middle, thank Christ. But we get there in the end, and of course the ring tally doesn't reflect what we actually collected. I was making notes of what we collected throughout the fight, but we finished it with 9 rings collected. Which...
Robot Overlord rule a robot kingdom. Long time no see, Sonic. My loathsome copy.
And finally, Metal Overlord, the true final boss of the game, sees Supersonic take it on alongside Tails and Knuckles in these wimpy little bubbles, but oh well. Now, of course, being a Supersonic fight, your rings will deplete throughout the boss, and the idea is to collect rings to keep going, and they are within these bubbles. Now, we're Alpha Gamers. We ain't going to be doing that, son. We're going to be moving on like tanks. The idea here was to take him down as fast as possible by using the glitch that fills up the Team Blast meter that we've been using in the other stories to take on bosses. Now, that being said, I don't know if it would be possible to do this in time by playing it normally. Chances are if you played perfectly, you'd get it done. Simply because if you was to use Sonic during the crystal attack and you was able to break every crystal, you've basically got a full homing attack meter. Same with Tails and the missiles. So I do believe this would be possible without having done the glitch. I only did the glitch because, well, it's quicker and frankly a lot easier than just going through it normally, but who cares? But I can confirm by doing this glitch anyway, and through common sense as well especially, that yeah, this would indeed be possible to do without having to refresh your ring count, because 5 Team Blast is not as much as it sounds if you play perfectly, and this is not a hard boss by any means. So we finish that with 0 rings.
The ultimate overlord, Metal Sonic. I am the real Sonic.
Yeah, we did it!
That was pretty tough. Too bad it's all over. For you!
I'm going to talk over this cutscene. That is 9 rings that I counted. It might be 8, it's one of the two. I'm pretty sure it's 9. So, what does that leave our full game total as? Well, let's take a doodle at that, shall we? So 166 plus 168 plus 66 plus 223. I believe it was. Was it 223? Yes, plus 9. Let's call it 9. 632 rings. Fucking shit. That's a lot of rings. So, don't know about you, but I don't think it's possible to beat this game without collecting a ring.